Hello and welcome. My name is Maria Spies. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of HolonIQ. Welcome to this presentation on the 2021 East Asia EdTech 150. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. I can see that there's folks from all over the world definitely interested in this this important part of the world as it relates to EdTech and other things, of course. Let me just start by a bit of an agenda. So it's about a half-hour presentation today. And firstly, I'm going to um, give a bit of global context about what's happening in the world of EdTech and EdTech investment, and then hone in more on the East Asia region and talk about the East Asia EdTech 150, the methodology, and bring in a few examples of the teams and the folks and the areas that make up the East Asia EdTech 150. So let's just start off. If you don't know about HolonIQ, we're a impact and intelligence platform. We track the market, we track innovations in the market, we track funding in the market. We try to pull together, and we do pull together millions and billions actually of data points around what's happening in education innovation, who's doing what, who's partnering with who, what are the new products, how is technology impacting education. We track policy as well. And so the platform and, all of our data obviously comes from the platform and our insights as well. We have some wonderful customers around the world, and I can see a few of them online, so welcome. Let's move on to just a little bit firstly about a global overview, because this is a very interesting time in the world for everybody, particularly as it relates to education. You may have seen that HolonIQ, we take a virtual tour every year of the world and have a look around at what are the emerging models, the emerging teams, the emerging technologies, and how are they impacting in terms of business models and traction in the market in EdTech. And so here is a sort of snapshot. You can see we've looked at the Latin America EdTech ecosystem in the LATAM EdTech 100, the Nordic Baltic region, Russia and CIS countries, Africa, Middle East, Australia, New Zealand. And this, of course, East Asia. Next week, we'll be launching the Europe EdTech 100. The week after will be Southeast Asia, and the week after that will be North America. So that will round off our world tour. And if you're not familiar with those, you can jump onto our website, and of course, and have a look. But what I can say is that each of these ecosystems definitely has its own personality. And whilst you can see across the world there are generic trends, you might say, global trends, actually how they play out in different parts of the world is very different. Of course, with education, context is king. What works in one geography or one context does not work in another. And so it's useful to really have a deep dive into each of these markets. So if you're interested in that, please take a look at our website. Moving forward, let's have a look at what's happening in the world of EdTech investment. And so this chart shows the venture capital funding over the last 10 years or 11 years, nearly 11 years. And you can see there, I guess the chart says it all in terms of the shape of that chart. And so from 2015, we've had a bubbling along of, $4 billion or so dollars. It's really relatively small compared with other tech markets, fintech, medtech, etc. But in 2020, really a lot of things changed as the world spun into a whole new sort of orbit in terms of COVID, and the importance of technology in learning processes, and also to support institutions and schools to deliver and to continue to deliver learning was just phenomenal. And you can see that investors saw the opportunity for that, and we've gone from sort of $7 or $8 billion a year to 16, and by Q3 2021 we're already at 15. And so 2021 overall is looking like around nearly, if not surpassing $20 billion, which it is huge compared with previous years, but still is relatively small compared with the sort of spend and the investment in other in technology related in other industries. However, most people do feel like there's a little bit of a pivot point from COVID, that we will continue to see a further, deeper, long-standing integration of technology into learning, even in K-12. Not necessarily everyone would be learning online, they'll go back to school, but technology or platforms and systems will become a core, and digital content will become a more core element, foundational element to education, rather than something around the periphery. And so we'll see how that plays out. The other thing you can see tracking here is what's happened in China. And so the edtech investment in China has been massive, mainly delivered by K-12 after school tutoring, online tutoring, English, maths, science, etc. And the regulatory changes that have come into place in 2021 have really devastated that market. And so the investors, of course, have moved elsewhere. And we see already by 2021, a much smaller investment in edtech in China, and that's had a big impact on the market. But actually, the other markets, even the US, for example, you can see has grown hugely, and so it's had COVID has had a sort of a reverse effect there. So key messages here. The other thing to mention, of course, India and Europe. I mean, India is just going gangbusters, and that continues to happen. And Europe is the fastest growing in terms of edtech investment over the last couple of years, although relative, smaller, still underweight though. We're still expecting that to grow quite a lot. And just pulling that out a little bit, you can see the patterns of each of those. So definitely India is on a roll and will continue to, with positive regulatory changes there. China will take some time to rebuild, and it doesn't look likely that the K-12 after school market will rebound at all to the heights of what it was in 2018, 2019, 2020. And other things will happen in that market though, and they already are. And of course, the US and Europe, as I mentioned. This just shows the sort of the split there between the different geographies. Same data. This graph is, we're still on global overview, but zooming right out, it gives you a bit of a feel for what's happening globally. And so management systems. Earlier on in 2020, earlier on in 2021, we recast the size of the global education market, and one of the things that we identified there was that learning infrastructure, or infrastructure for learning, would really take off, and it has. And that's what we might refer to as management systems, and that's all the infrastructure that schools need, and that universities need, and that companies need in order to deliver digital learning. And so we're already seeing that in learning management systems, and synchronous video classes, and analytics and reporting, and so on and so on. And so we're definitely already seeing that move ahead. And the colors obviously are the legend of the geographies, which we just talked about. Overall, still around more than 50 overall globally, more than 50% of edtech investment is in the workforce upskilling space, and that remains the case. Geographies are different though. In some geographies, it's all K-12, but overall globally, it's really a workforce story, because that sort of continued workforce upskilling space is less dominated by regulation, number one, and number two, there's a very, very big demand for reskilling in the world. And so that's the sort of overall trends. Moving into East Asia particularly, what we're seeing here. So firstly, it's a very interesting geography, of course. It is, the tech innovation in East Asia has been amazing. 40% of the world's top 10 technology firms were in Asia last year. And that's, a huge increase on previous years. 36% of all unicorns, tech unicorns, are in Asia at 170, but 10 years ago, less than 10 years ago, there were 2. And so we're seeing a meteoric rise, and 25% actually of the world's unicorns are in China. But in other markets, in other more mature markets in East Asia, like Korea and Japan, where we see very sort of robust, mature ecosystems, not a huge number of unicorns, but much more robust and long-standing tech innovators of previous decades, I guess. The other thing that's interesting about this geography is, Asia captured, a vast percentage of global growth in patent filings over the last decade. 5G, as well as, electric battery vehicles and so on. Those sort of patents are really huge in coming out of East Asia. And so that is tomorrow's unicorns, tomorrow's innovations. And so this growth is phenomenal. Asia captured 40% of startup investment. That's IPOs and venture capital. Over the past few years, growing from 16%. And representing 43% of global growth. So there's a lot of investment going on into this space as well. And so this is harking forward into explaining some of what we're seeing right now, but also some of what we're going to be seeing over the next 10 years, I guess. And then, Asia's share of global R&D investment has grown hugely as well, accounting for half of global growth. And so this is sort of the environment in which education and edtech is being articulated in the East Asia region. I mean, the other thing, of course, East Asia is not all of Asia. There's other parts of Asia, whether it be South Asia, India, or Southeast Asia, and so they're very different markets. It's sort of the advanced Asian economies and the developing Asian economies. And they sit side by side, some being huge innovators and others being very big markets or potential markets. And so it's an interesting dynamic in the whole region as well. Let's move forward into what's happening in East Asia in EdTech funding. And so it's K-12 is very strong in funding in the region. So K-12 attracted 65% of venture funding over the past decade, and workforce 20% and growing. So you may recall I saying that overall globally, 50% or more than 50% of edtech funding is in workforce, but not so in East Asia, where K-12 actually is the big edtech funding. It is illustrative of a real focus in the region on education, and K-12 education particularly. The importance of that, the ability and willingness to spend, of course, and much more open attitude to private education, B2C, direct to consumer sort of markets. And so you can see there the huge sort of increases, up into 2020, particularly in terms of deals. Each one of those lines, each one of those segments is one deal, and the size of the segment is the size of the deal. So you can see very big ones, happening and mostly in K-12, and then a real drop off in 2021, mainly driven by that China effect that I was talking about. This is the overall number. So each one of those little lines is an edtech deal, a venture capital deal. It has been declining since the highs of 2018. This is mainly driven by those regulatory changes I was talking about in China, which have been on the cards for quite some time. But you see sort of quite strong and continuing investment in Japan, South Korea, etc. But mainly it's numbers and dollars are different. This is numbers. The size of the edtech deals have been going up, but the number of them has been reducing. So that sort of gives you a little bit of context there. Looking at the geography of it, each one of these circles is a venture capital deal, and the size of the circle is the size of the deal. And so you can see they're dominated by China. It's the biggest market, of course, and some very, very big sort of deals there. This is over the last 10 years as well, and we'll see a different landscape if we did this. When we do this in a couple of years, we'll see a different landscape there, given the regulatory changes. Japan is very strong, South Korea as well. So it's sort of different markets, but quite robust, all of them in their own way. Now moving on to the 2021 East Asia EdTech 150. Firstly, just in terms of what it's focused on. So this is, firstly, it's quite difficult to choose 150 in such a sort of robust market. There's a lot of amazing teams doing very, very interesting things. We do focus on try to focus on newer, young, fast-growing, innovative companies, whether it be from pre-K right through to upskilling. There are a lot of mature companies in this market. So generally for this EdTech 150, we're looking at companies less than 10 years old, though there are some exceptions, in circumstances where the EdTech has been bootstrapped or spinning out of academic projects and so on. Headquartered in East Asia, or predominantly have their customers in market there. They're not bought, they're not acquired, they're not listed, they're not a subsidiary, etc. This is not tech products. This is startup companies, and as I said, listed companies, maturing companies, of which there are many, are excluded from this. So this is focusing on the young ones. And we look at a range of things. We look at the market for those products, the product itself, its uniqueness in the market, etc. The team, expertise and diversity, the capital, have they got or can they attract capital either through revenue or through funding, and then their momentum. So they're the sort of criteria that look at when we do these EdTech 100s and 50s around the world. This is the East Asia EdTech 150. So congratulations to all those teams who have made it into this list. As I said, it's a difficult task to choose just 150 out of the thousands, many thousands of companies that are operating in this space. The way that we categorize these organizations follow the main sort of, I guess, subsectors from management systems and hardware through to STEAM solutions, science, technology, engineering, and math solutions, and arts as well should be in there. Advanced technologies from virtual reality or AR, VR, as I said, or simulation, blockchain, artificial intelligence, etc. Tutoring and test prep, of course, is does get or has gotten over the past few years quite a lot of headlines, just given the hugeness of the deals there and what the sort of headlines, particularly in China. It's quite a strong, still, and robust segment, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Language learning, and that is, again, very sort of foundational, really, for the region. Language learning becomes like a ticket to play, particularly if looking into global education or jobs. Digital content and online learning and workforce and skills. So digital content and online learning is the way in which and how companies, schools, individuals are really needing to build out digital solutions, and digital content is one of those. And that has been growing globally, particularly in the K-12 space over the last 2 years. This is an area that we are watching in terms of digital content. We expect a lot more movement in this space, and we expect an integration of content and experience. And that leads to things like personalized platforms and adaptive learning, adaptive assessment, and so on. So digital content and online learning is one to watch. And then workforce and skills, as I said, this is a growing component, particularly vocational education. Governments around the world have decided that actually vocational systems could be their solution, their lower cost than higher education, lower cost solution to upskilling and reskilling the workforce. And so we're seeing some interesting models come through in that space. Let me just jump through to we've done a bit of an analysis of this EdTech 150, East Asia, EdTech 150. So firstly, K-12 is around 55% of the cohort. Now, you may recall on the last 10 years of EdTech investment funding in this region, 65% of that funding was K-12. And so it gains more funding than companies. So that means that there's a real focus there for investors. Workforce, 28%. That's actually a really growing area. Higher education, less so, but workforce includes vocational education, boot camps, new models, different models for upskilling or reskilling workforce. And so there's a lot more funding flowing into that area, and that's definitely a growing area in East Asia as well. When you jump down to the subsector level, it's much more it's a much more balanced picture, essentially. If you put together STEAM and advanced technology, I think that's interesting because it's 30% of the cohort. And advanced technologies, things like robotics and AI and blockchain and AR, VR, and links in with STEAM, sort of STEAM and coding linking together there. So 30% in that area. Management systems, and language learning is 1 in 5. management systems growing as well, especially over the next couple of years. We would expect that to definitely grow. And so anyway, it's a relatively balanced picture. In terms of geography, so China makes up over half the cohort, as you would expect, given the size of that market. And Japan and South Korea are really solid ecosystems, more mature actually than startup-y. There's lots of startups, but it's also a very mature ecosystems. And then in terms of the age profile, this is interesting compared with other regions. So, for example, in places like Africa, something like 40% of the startups are under 3 years. It's just a different sort of maturity. But here you see the growth stage startups 35% and the 7 to 9-year-old startups 31%. And so this pattern is indicative of a mature or maturing ecosystem, although we have differences in each of these geographies we talked about. Moving forward to business model, this won't be a surprise probably to most of you on the call. 81% of the cohort are in direct consumer models, and that is indicative of the market for sure. It's a highly consumer tech sort of consumer set of markets here in East Asia, and we see that, especially through COVID, these models growing where learners themselves, parents, students, really reaching out and wanting direct sort of solutions for their learning. And so this is not a surprise, and it's indicative of other regions as well, although this is more it's a higher proportion of direct to consumer than we have seen in other regions. That does leave opportunities actually in the B2B space, where EdTech solutions to support companies and to support institutions who are struggling generally around the world to deliver digital solutions for their students. I think there's big opportunities there. The other thing that we're seeing is, a number of EdTech solutions that are starting B2C and then seeing the opportunity to partner for B2B solutions. So we're seeing some who are hybrid business models. I wanted to jump into just a couple of these segments within the market map to just pull out a few interesting trends that are happening. So the tutoring test prep market, as I said, there are complete shockwaves in the China tutoring market due to these regulatory changes. So if you're not aware of those, the Chinese government has decided to, every sort of private tutoring, after-school tutoring company, if they are doing academic tutoring, so academic subjects, need to be non-profit. And so China's sort of concerned about their students and their welfare. It's a very competitive environment, and you see instances of students' well-being, being compromised because of sort of a real hothouse environment. And so the government has been focusing on that area, and so all those tutoring companies that were raising literally billions of dollars are now not non-profit or have to be by the end of the year. And so of course we've seen a bit of a collapse in that market, and some are closing parts of their businesses, and others are pivoting, and I see that a number of them are pivoting into the adult upskilling. It's tutoring, I guess, it's teaching, but in the adult upskilling area and vocational area. So it'll be interesting to see that unfold. Still though, in terms of test prep in civil service exams, financial professions exams and other professional training remains strong. The other thing, of course, is AI solutions for tutoring have become much more popular. Teams like Reed, for example, see you on the call, hello, and peer Q&A platforms, different sort of models for tutoring and learning things outside a formal education system. We don't think, China's K-12 private tutoring market is unlikely to return to the highs of the last few years, given those regulatory changes. The market structure will change, and we'll see how that unfolds in countries like Japan and Korea as well, I guess. The sort of tutoring to support K-12 remains strong, although again those sort of face-to-face after-school tutoring model has, given COVID, has sort of changed the game, and we're seeing some interesting new or pivots in terms of existing face-to-face models moving online much more rapidly than probably they ever thought they would. Language learning is a sort of quite a strong and solid proposition. It's a ticket to play, not just English language, but we're seeing sort of solutions for learning Korean or learning Chinese, or other languages, of course, as well, and quite high tech. Learn by listening. So the AI, sort of voice AI in language learning, is very strong, and these technologies are becoming much more sort of embedded into language learning solutions. There's obviously, it's a relatively competitive market, but voice-based AI, and also sort of peer models is also interesting. Having conversations with native speakers on a peer sort of platform, or learn a language through text, or those sorts of models, is really interesting things happening there. And then the other segment that's worth talking about is the STEAM segment. And so obviously there's that science, technology, coding, and things like that. And K-12, this is dominated by K-12 learning, many solutions for children's coding and programming and so on. But also we're seeing the narrative change slightly from just learning coding, but to moving to logical thinking skills. And it's articulated perhaps through programming, but it's around the thinking skills, mathematical thinking skills, for example. You will see solutions for chess education online, music education online. Obviously there's the generally, this is nothing new, but home kits, robotics, maker solutions. These are predominantly a direct-to-consumer market. The arts category has really grown rapidly in the last few years. Music education online is enormous globally. You wouldn't believe how many solutions there are for learning any sort of instrument you can think of, or singing, or any sort of music education. There's very popular solutions in that space. Driven to some extent in this part of the world by these regulatory changes we see in China. Some of the solutions driving innovations in kids exercising, painting, cultural solutions, those sorts of other the arts side of STEAM is gaining a lot of traction around the world. People are concerned about not over-educating, but too much academic and not enough sort of other types of thinking, creative thinking, etc. So we're seeing online solutions for these, which a few years ago probably the technology wasn't there to support that. And then finally, management systems and hardware. Like I said, given COVID, we do expect over the next couple of years to be a very strong proposition in student information systems, learning management systems, admissions, analytics, parent-teacher communication, or school-parent communication systems, classroom tech. And in this part of the world, the classroom tech side of it is really dominant, probably building on the long-standing sort of hardware strength in the industries, in these geographies such as Japan and Korea. So hardware and software to support schools and universities, smart campus solutions, live broadcasting systems, online video communication analysis, the class ting and class in, and even those next class AI, those sorts of solutions. High tech learning, digital learning environments for synchronous, the learning management systems, but not really just a learning management system where you put files, but this is where you can really easily communicate. There's a lot of built-in communication and analytics, built for collaboration, much more sort of advanced than anyone than what we have experienced previous to sort of the last couple of years. And then there's some solutions in here for study abroad, financing education, and so on. As the world opens up, we're seeing a bit of an uptick in the solutions to support students studying abroad. Again, admissions and finding their university, financing their education, etc., like that. So we're seeing those sort of solutions also rise. And just jumping right back into the whole market map again. Congratulations to the teams who made this list, and the many hundreds of more who are working and doing amazing things in their geography to support learning and education. But congratulations to those ones who are in the 2021 East Asia EdTech 150. For those of you who are interested, or any customers, of course, on the call, the detailed lists of these organisations in all these geographies, and lots of data around the trends are available on the platform. So please log in and have a look. And if you'd like to know more, of course, get in contact with us. Once more, congratulations to the teams who made it into the 2021 East Asia EdTech 150. If you're interested in this part of the world, in 2 weeks' time, we'll be launching the Southeast Asia EdTech 50. And again, a different type of geography and a different personality to these startups. So I welcome you to join that webinar as well. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a lovely rest of your day. Bye-bye.